Doing hard things on purpose, I think, is the key to everything. And your hard thing doesn't have to be physical. That's my way. A lot of people, whether it's starting a family or a business or getting through the death of a loved one or loss of a relationship, I mean, facing those things, head on and learning from the experiences, it's really our only way towards growth.
Welcome to the Wisdom Matrix, Charlie. It's amazing to have you on and to be able to have what will no doubt be a fascinating conversation. We've known each other now for a while. Always love our talks and discovering more and more about the inner workings of Charlie and the fascinating history that you've had up to this point. So thank you for joining us. Taking time out of your busy training schedule, no doubt, given what you've got on deck. As we dive into this discussion, maybe give our audience a little bit of Cliff Notes version of Charlie Engle, and then we can dive into some pretty juicy topics that I think a lot of people are going to find pretty impossible to comprehend with the human mind, but you do a great job of really inspiring people and getting people to think out of their comfort zone. So excited to have the conversation this morning.
Man, thank you guys for having me. And I don't know, I'm confused. I thought this was about you today, Monty. I thought the three of us, the other guys, we have a surprise for you. No, I'm kidding.
Never about me, always about you, Charlie.
You know way too much about me already, but we'll share. I'm in North Carolina these days, in Durham. My wife and I live here, and weirdly, it's a full circle thing. I kind of grew up here and left for many decades, and when I got married again 13 years ago, we decided to make North Carolina our home again, and I love it. It's easy living here. It's good sports, good weather, beaches and mountains, and it's a pretty nice place. Growing up, a lot of pressure. I had a dad who played for Dean Smith at University of North Carolina in his first couple of years of coaching. I had a grandfather who, is well known in the state as a track coach. My parents were 19 years old when I was born. And that just sort of led to this super bohemian upbringing. All of my clothes were tie-dyed. I didn't know that there were clothes of other colors. Like everything was, everything was tie-dyed, and my hair was long. And, and I had this sort of free form, only child lifestyle when I was a kid. It was just pretty wild and free, and I enjoyed it for a while. Moved in with my dad. My parents got divorced early on, and I moved in with my dad for a little more structure, and honestly, just so I could play sports. My mom didn't, the day my mom was trying to take me to a soccer practice, which she didn't really even know what was going on, and she told me to go put my costume on. It was like I finally knew, even as an 11-year-old, that I needed a change. And anyway, I moved in with my dad, and I played all the sports and made good grades and did all that, and ended up going to University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill and played a couple years of basketball there, actually, on the JV team for Roy Williams, was the JV coach back in the day, and was good enough to be on that team, but discovered in a big way alcohol, drinking. It was 1980. That dates me a bit, but the drinking age was still 18, so I had that going for me. And and I figured out that I was an incredibly average person in the university. Like 4,000 other freshmen had at least as good a resume as I had from high school, but I could drink more than anyone. Period. Not an aspirational thing that leads to, a positive career path or life path, but for a minute, that's just who I was. And cocaine in the 80s, it was the cocaine decade, in my opinion. It still is these days, but back then it was a Miami Vice TV show, and just I don't know, just Pablo Escobar and just everything that was, it was an accumulation of things at that time. And I mean, I never actually tell this story, but we would fly, terrifying. We would fly down to Miami where you could acquire certain drugs, cocaine especially, for nothing. I mean, literally like for nothing. And, and we would rent a car and drive it all the way back, which is just, I was so stupid at that point in my life that it's almost like it didn't occur to me that this was illegal. Like I just didn't, it was so ubiquitous on campus and sort of in everyday life that it just was, yeah, it was crazy. Anyway, that led to a path to nowhere. And I basically spent 10 years, mired in a drug and alcohol induced sort of chaotic race to always prove that, I was fine. Because I got married, I bought houses, I bought cars, and my attitude was if you could do those things, certainly, I mean, how could you have a problem if you're, look at all these things I'm accomplishing.
You're a functional adult-ish.
Hey, and like
Yeah.
even an exceptional one in my very unhumble opinion back then. And and so like who cares? I deserve these other things and behaviors, because just because. And and then I had my first son and things changed for me. And I decided that I wasn't going to survive addiction. I went to rehab. I went to church. I did a bunch of things to try to like, curb my behaviors, and none of them worked. And I laugh, and I do speak on this a lot. I laugh about how we as humans very often say, well, that didn't work. And it is like saying a diet doesn't work or whatever. I mean, it only works if you actually do the program. And it didn't work because I was unwilling. I went to AA meetings because my opinion was alcohol was really screwing up my drug use. And so I wasn't going to try to stop. I was going to try to like manage it. And it wasn't until I got past, that thinking and realizing I actually wanted to be a dad and a husband, that things turned around. And when I found, there's a lot of stories around how I got sober and what happened and all that. But just for time right now, that launched a period of time in my life. Sobriety launched a period in my time of life and time in my life where I just wanted to focus on two things: running and sobriety, going to meetings. I was very lucky. My wife she grew up in an alcoholic household. So she, with a father who drank. And so he's a very kind, nice man, but just, he drank. And so she knew that chaos. She knew that craziness. So she was comfortable with mine. And she was instrumental in helping me get sober. And she understood, and you guys, actually, I know you have kids, Marty. I'm not sure about everybody else, but assuming you all do or are in that phase, like, I'm going to an 8 o'clock meeting in a church basement, every single night, 7 days a week. And not once did she ever go like, hey, we have kids, because she understood without recovery and without running, there would be no husband, there would be no father, there would be no life. And
Now,
so,
how many years, just to set the timeline? So this was what, 36 years ago or so that you
yeah,
got sober?
a little less than that. So I'm coming up in July 23rd on 34 years sober. So yeah, 34. And not coincidentally, my oldest son is 34. It was about 2 months rather into his life that I had my last very sort of crazy, well-known, 6-day binge that, nearly ended my life. And I had to decide whether I really wanted to like be on this planet or not. Yeah. And so that led, as you know, to a lot of running. I committed, what I did for 3 straight years, 3 years without missing a single day. I went to a recovery meeting every day for 3 straight years, and I ran every day for 3 straight years, like without missing one day. And it was because I had the belief that my life depended on it, and I think that that's it's a critical, piece of the puzzle for me. I think if we don't believe that kind of thing, then we're not going to be fully committed. That's what I thought. And I ended up running like, 35 marathons during those 3 years. And as I always like to say, I had that whole addiction thing under control. And, we were talking a little bit before we started about, addiction and how people view it and how we view ourselves with obsessive and addictive behavior. And hopefully we can get into some of that today. But that ultimately led me to run races all over the world and become, one of the top ultra runners, in the world, at least for a while. And I sought adventure. I always saw running as a vehicle, not an act. It's not that I don't like to run, but I don't like to run nearly as much as people think I do. I like I like what running does for me and how it allows me to live my life, but the actual act of running, very often it's only it's kind of like business and parenting and everything else. I mean, anybody who says it's 100% of the time it's amazing and fantastic is totally full of shit. I mean, it just sucks a whole lot of the time. But those tiny miraculous little moments where we feel peace and we feel everything falls into place, the weather, the trail, the song you're listening to, the like whatever it is, those moments are fleeting, but they allow us to keep going and pursuing those moments exactly.
Right. I'm sure
And
that
then
was the whole time running across the Sahara.
exactly. Well, then, as you know, I was the senior producer for a TV show called Extreme Makeover Home Edition for years, and like life had gotten good for me, and I was one of the top runners. And then someone blurted out this terrible idea that maybe running across the Sahara Desert would be fun. It wasn't, but I did this thing, and it kind of put me on the map out there in the world, and weirdly, that led to, me getting arrested and charged with a crazy financial crime during the whole financial meltdown in this country. And I ended up in federal prison for a year and a half, which, of course, is a whole, that's a whole crazy chapter of my life, and one that maybe the most meaningful chapter in a lot of ways. That kind of forced hardship that's both embarrassing and humiliating. What it really, to dive right into the lesson though, the greatest lesson that I learned from that is people are not sitting around thinking about me. All the time. Nobody's sitting around thinking about any of us for more than a couple of minutes, and then they're on back to thinking about themselves. So just when we think what's happened to us is like all anybody can talk about, that might be true for about 5 minutes, and then life moves on. And I got out of that and I continued my life. I got married again. I've been married 13 years. Quite frankly, the last 10 of those, have been, I am a full-time caretaker here in my house to a wife who's, trying very hard not to die from cancer. And, from a perspective standpoint, there's very few things that will ground you every single day than to watch your person, your partner suffer and deal with pain and get up and fucking show up again and again. So I have very little to complain about. And as you know, I also have a big expedition coming up next year that I'm sure we'll get into.
Well, that was a good summary of how you got here. Although there's a lot of spiciness in the nooks and cracks in your
You
story.
unpack whatever you want, man.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm ready. So that's
And
fun.
there'll be a lot in the show notes on this one, and I recommend people read your book, Running Man, which is, I remember when I was in the middle of it, there was one point where I gave you a call and I said, man, I'm really glad that I know you because I just don't see how you're going to get out of this chapter alive, the book and then the documentary of running the Sahara is also available out there. So we'll add links there.
Great. Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah. No,
It's a
thanks.
wild story. One of the things that maybe you could share that I always find is kind of a funny story is when you were in Australia, I believe it was, and you signed up for a race that you thought was going to be much shorter than it was, and that's what really got you into the ultra distance
Yeah.
mindset.
Yeah. I mean, this doesn't make me seem particularly intelligent, this story, but, by that point, as I mentioned a minute ago, I'd already run like dozens of marathons. It was a few years into my sobriety, and I had a company that I chased hailstorms like for a living and contracted with insurance companies and auto manufacturers, and like 10,000 Fords got hit in Brisbane, Australia by hail. And I took a crew of guys over there to fix hail. And, and at that point I was in a nice routine. I traveled a fair amount, and the first thing I would do was I would find an AA meeting to attend regularly because it's worldwide, and Australia was easy. I actually spoke the language mostly, and I always found a running group, to run with. And these are back in the days where everything's analog. Like you have to ask people where the running, this is 1995 ish, and so you have to ask people where the running store is. And then, we were out for a run one day, and after I finished working, and I came into the store, and there's a bulletin board, old style cork board flyer on there with, you tear off the directions, on a little slip of paper at the bottom. And I decided I was going to go run a 5K that weekend. And as it turns out, I show up and I register, and I'm just doing my thing. Like I'm registering for a 5K, and I put my number on, and there's a very cute blonde woman at the desk, and I'm totally probably overly transfixed with her as I'm signing up and paying my few dollars, and I go over and start stretching, and there's a couple of Aussies nearby, and I can hear them talking, and they're like saying like, "Hey, mate, it's a really hot one today. I sure hope I can finish this before dark." And I'm thinking to myself, like, these Aussies are, man, they're slow. Like, what is up with this? So what are they going to do? Crawl? And I literally laughed out loud. I laughed out loud just to myself. And one of the guys looked at me, and he's like, "Hey, mate, so have you ever run a 50K before?" And I'm like, "No, why?" And like I started to sweat immediately, and I walked back over to the table, cute blonde again. I'm like, "Excuse me, do you have a map of this course?" And she hands me a map, and it says, Nanango Rainforest 50K. And like on the number, the bib I'm wearing, it says 50K. The banner said, like, it just never occurred to me that anyone would run farther than a marathon. Like, who does that? Why would you do that? Plus, mid 90s, Australia ultra running scene has changed so much over these last 30 years. I mean, the women in the race were hairier than the men. Like this is a very bohemian, gritty, you know, dirt bag, which is a climbing term, but like kind of a race. That's what it was like, a couple hundred people. Anyway, race starts. I decide I'm going to go ahead and do one loop because I've driven all the way out there. I'm not going to get the t-shirt, but I'm going to run the first loop, which is 11 miles. So it's basically three loops of about 11 miles. And I'm going to do the first loop, and I'm quitting, and I do the first loop, and it's amazing. The weather's cool, and I'm crossing streams, and there's birds, and having great conversations. That early race feeling. It's just so magical, but I'm done. I'm done. I'm excited because I'm running one loop and I'm leaving. And I go over this hill, and there's the finish line. And the announcer is like, he's calling people's names, and he's like, "Oh, here comes the Yank. Here comes the Yank. He's in 10th place." And I'm like, "Oh my God." Like, now I'm representing all of North America in this race because I'm the only non-Australian in the entire race. But I'm still quitting. And I crossed the line, and I'm standing there stuffing like Oreos in my mouth at the snack table. And I'll never forget, the cute blonde trots up next to me, and she's like, "You're doing great. you're going to keep going, aren't you? And I'm like, oh yeah, of course. I mean, you know, because basically we're idiots, we cannot, I could not possibly tell her that I was quitting. So, but I decide that I'm still quitting and I'm going to run. That my car is about 2 miles down the trail when the event, the loop. And so I'm going to run to my car and just get my car and leave, which would have been a terrible thing to do to the race. But luckily, I get to the car and I don't have my keys. Like they're at the base of the announcer's feet. And anyway, I continue the second loop. I come up over that rise, and here comes the Yank again. He's in fifth place. And actually, it might be. I mean, there's a lot of formative moments in my life, but like that might very well be certainly one of the top five most important moments for me, where I had the recognition after lacking courage and trying to quit and everything else. I had the recognition that if I just did the last loop, that I would accomplish something I'd never done before. And that just doesn't happen that often. I would run roughly 32 miles, and the farthest I'd ever gone was a marathon. And I found that was a cool thing to think about. And so I headed out on the third loop, and I was sunburned and chafed and blistered, and I was a mess. And and I finished the race and I crossed the finish line, and it was a super meaningful moment. And weirdly, I ended up winning the race. It's the definite example of like the universe sometimes does for us what we cannot do for ourselves. And that changed everything. And after that race, I mean, I asked the question out loud to myself there in Australia after that race, I wonder how far I can go. And that was it. And then I went from there, and I haven't looked back since in over 30 years. So
You're like Forrest Gump, just keep running.
I'm not particularly, I mean, Marty, you've been around me. I mean, I am not an exceptional physical specimen. I mean, I'm in good shape, but my VO2 max isn't off the charts. My
I think you're
stubbornness.
an amazing specimen. Don't sell yourself short, Charlie.
All right. Well, thank
You
you.
you can
It's
endure a lot, which is definitely a superpower. You can run
Thank you.
far. You can endure a lot.
Well,
You've staying
endurance
power.
isn't a physical trait. It's a mental one.
Mental. Yeah,
I mean, very little of it is actually, you guys all do this crazy long stand-up paddleboard event, and like that to most people is impossible, but it's only impossible because they absolutely believe it's impossible.
yeah. Well, there is. It's the wisdom of doing really hard things, right, and challenging yourself. There's a lot of value in there, and Travis and Josh having done the ultra endurance activities they have, and we've all done. I mean, there's a lot of lessons in those moments, right? And especially pushing through barriers and doing things that we haven't accomplished before. So, thank you for sharing that story. I always get a kick out of it. The showing up for a 5K and realizing it's a 50K.
Genius.
Genius. Brilliant. Well, it was clearly an important moment in your life.
What?
If it had only been a 5K, we probably wouldn't be having this
Yeah.
conversation.
No, I would have just kept running marathons. I thought I was going to be that 80-year-old guy hunched over probably to one side, still running my 500th marathon. And I think I would have been happy doing that, but like that's not what was meant for me.
So Charlie, let's unpack like the mental aspect of all this a little bit, and circling back to, your 20s, which were fueled by alcohol and cocaine and whatever else you were consuming in your body. But then you clearly found running. Unpack for us this, you mentioned, did I just swap one addiction out for another? I would love to explore that, but also like how did your mental mindset go from, a decade of alcohol and drugs to sobriety and running? Like I can't imagine that was just like an overnight thing where you're like, oh yeah, I can just endure and a lot of pain and push myself in order to reach these bliss states, and this is helping me maintain sobriety. So like just take us through all that.
Yeah. I mean, Josh, it's maybe the most like it's the most important question that there is for me because it's not what people think. It's not even close to what people imagine. I didn't have this blissful journey of running changes everything. First of all, let's talk about behaviors for just 1 second. Alcohol, some people freak out when I say this, but like alcohol saved my life,
Mm,
right? I drank because I was in pain. I did
mhm,
drugs because I was in pain. People don't do things that I did during that decade for fun. Like the fun is gone very, very early on, whatever that fun might be. So I did those things and I'm grateful that I did them because if I hadn't had that outlet, I probably wouldn't be here today, right? I had, for whatever myriad reasons that we all have, in our life history and the way things go, traumas, insecurities, all of that. Like, so I did those things for that reason, and it saved my life. So then I get sober, and I still feel like a piece of shit. Just because you get sobriety doesn't mean like, oh, like I'm awesome, like everything is good, like all of that. In fact, now I'm present, like we talked about a little bit, and especially with running and adventure, like it's like a bright spotlight shining on you all the time. Like you don't have anywhere to hide anymore. Like if you're in pain, physical or otherwise, you have to feel it now.
mhm,
And so those years of running, even during my 10 years of addiction, I would clean up. I was a binger. Like I would go 6 months all out, everything I could do, and I'd finally like whatever, something would happen, I would clean up for a while, and running was always a part of that. But it was equal parts self-loathing and punishment because as you all know, you can use physical exertion to make yourself hurt. And so I'm very upfront about this idea that it wasn't just like, oh, this all feels great and I'm so much healthier now. I was beating the shit out of myself because I felt terrible as a human being and like I deserved this punishment. I didn't actually deserve to feel good. It was, but it was a means to me getting better. And like for AA, let's just put it this way: for 12-step recovery, I had to run every day just so I could go sit in a fucking meeting with a bunch of other losers. And I mean, that's not how I feel today. That's how I felt then. Like I had to go burn off some crazy before I could actually go sit in there and listen to other people, you know, chatter on about, bullshit one day at a time, gratitude, like all the things that I did not feel that I related to. And so, point of all that is it is this long, slow process. And I started entering races and running across the Gobi Desert and the Atacama Desert and the Amazon jungle and all these things. And one would think, if you look from the outside, I'm just having this really adventurous life. On the inside, I am slowly but surely, becoming an actual human being because doing, as Marty said a minute ago, doing hard things on purpose, I think is the key to everything. And your hard thing doesn't have to be physical. That's my way. A lot of people, whether it's starting a family or a business or getting through the death of a loved one or loss of a relationship, I mean, facing those things, head on and learning from the experience it's really our only way towards growth. So there's a book that you guys probably also know that I think Marty and I have talked about called The Comfort Crisis, and I'm irritated that I didn't write it actually because I think I could have. But the biggest lesson I learned early on, and this is in so many religions and faiths and belief systems, but chosen hardship is far and away the most meaningful and formative behavior that we can do. Whatever form that takes, when we choose it and we empty ourselves out. And what I found was, I've never run 100-miler where I didn't want to quit. I mean, I'm not stupid. At some point I want to quit. And getting through that moment, finding the way, the path to get past that moment, I think is a reflection of everything, because that happens in business. You usually don't have a bad period of time. You usually have some really bad moments where it feels impossible that you're going to be able to continue your business, or you have a terrible argument with your partner, your wife, or whoever it is. It feels in that moment like it's going to feel this way forever. Projecting forward, it's never going to be better. And so learning how to set that aside, this is the greatest skill that I have. I learned how to set aside that feeling of hopelessness for the moment. I didn't shove it away because I don't think ignoring it is useful. But if you can just move it over to the shelf for a minute, and instead of saying, okay, I want to quit this race, instead you say, okay, the next aid station is 3 miles away. I just have to get there. And when I get there, then I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to eat 1,000 calories. I'm going to drink a bunch of stuff. I'm going to maybe walk for a minute. And lo and behold, magically, you recover just enough to be able to keep going. Those are the lessons I learned, especially in those early years of punishment. And slowly it's shifted. And we'll talk, I'm sure, in a bit about this next expedition of mine. My mindset for this next thing is so different than it was for the Sahara or for those early races I did, because I'm seeking joy. I'm not like perfect mentally or anything these days. I still have my issues, but I think that's the genesis that has happened through the years. But the only way that happens for anybody, in my belief, is you got to go do some shit often.
Yeah, I think you're spot on, where especially, I focus on men, where I truly believe that men need challenge and hardship in order to grow, in order to actually own the fact that something needs to change. And they're not the problem, maybe I'm the problem, right? And so actually using chosen suffering as a vehicle to, yeah, take a look at yourself, face what you've been avoiding, and then have to feel everything. So I love that about your journey.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I know enough about all three of yours too that I know how well you relate to what I said. So, it's an ever-growing, evolving thing.
Yeah, you're going to get hit with it. Like you said earlier, life's going to choose for
No
you,
doubt.
whether you like it or not, whether that's your destiny or your karma or however you look at it. Life is going to bring adversity and hardship. And so it's nice to live in a time where we have the freedom and the luxury and the pleasure of choosing activities that are scheduled suffering maybe, but somewhat enjoyable at the same time, where you get to actually have an experience and it's not just totally forced on you. Like sometimes the surprising and shocking diagnosis like cancer, cystic fibrosis, or any one of these things that happen in life, divorce, betrayal, whatever it is. It's nice to have the balance of choosing the adversity when you can.
No, I mean, what you said there is so, so important, Travis. And it is the more often, I think here's another thing too. And I don't know if you guys are like this or not, because I don't even know this part of Mahdi. I think you show up even if you're unprepared. But like I am not a fly by the seat of my pants guy particularly, but people view me that way. But it's because I'm not afraid of doing things that I don't know how to do. I'm not really like I've done enough of this. Like, okay, this stand-up paddleboard thing that you guys do, I am so intrigued by this and I am going to do it someday. Do you know? I've only ever been on a stand-up paddleboard twice in my entire life, and all I can ever remember is the friend of mine who was out there with me talking about butt sharks, which I think meant that all I did was like bend over. I was hunched over the entire time and I never could like stand up and relax. And like, so his point was like sharks were going to leap out of the water and bite me in the ass. But, like, and there's no proof that I could even, I'm not skilled enough to do that event yet. That would not stop me from going out there and doing that event.
Right.
Well, Charlie, I think it's one people will be fascinated because you talked about the Sahara. I think we should just pause there for a second because most people won't really be able to wrap their head around that. And I think that's a one I would love for you just to give us a quick recap of what that entailed. But I think that's a perfect example of what you just said, right? I mean, you didn't show up to the Sahara being like, I know exactly how to do this, how it's going to go, but you showed up and you got after it and you got through it. But maybe just for the enjoyment of our audience,
Yeah.
who are trying to wrap their head around, well, what does that even mean to
Right.
run across the Sahara? Maybe
Yeah.
shed some light on that.
Yeah, it is funny. I can't tell you how many people have said, even in the ultra world, they're like, running across the Sahara. Oh, yeah, I had a friend that did that. And what they mean is there's a very famous race you may know of called the Marathon des Sables. And like it's in Morocco and it's a 7-day stage race and it's about 150 miles over 7 days. And it's a hard race. It's a very hard race. But for me, I'll take a quick step back. So the Sahara idea came from a guy in the Amazon jungle during that race that just blurted out to me, hey, have you ever thought about running across the Sahara? Because I don't think anybody's ever done that before. And and I literally told him it was the dumbest idea I'd ever heard, and you'd have to be an idiot to even think about it. And I love to remind people that sometimes like words said to us by a stranger in passing can change the entire course of your life. It plants that seed, that nugget that you can't stop thinking about, and years later we pretend like we had the idea, but someone else probably, nudged us in that direction. So I couldn't stop thinking about the Sahara. Like I couldn't stop. And I basically just ended up deciding to tell people that I was going to be the first person to run across the Sahara. And with no proof, I was a pretty accomplished runner at that point, but there's no guidebook for this. And it felt pretty insane, but ultimately, I took possession of this idea, and I do think this is an important point, and maybe it was. I was already long time sober at that, but I was like 16 years sober, so I wasn't that worried about other people's opinions at that point, for sure. Don't know if I ever have been, but at that point, I didn't care that people said, this is a terrible idea, like it's too hot, you can't get resupplied, it's dangerous, like all these things just made me dig my heels in more. And look, this is the most, I think I've only said this one other time, like in a public setting, but like I liked the idea that people thought I was different. I mean, who wants to be like everybody else? So when people would find out that I had this idea long before I did it, like I liked already the feeling that it fed my ego some of like, oh, well, that's like, you can't, it's 5,000 miles across the Sahara Desert. Like you can't do that. Like it's just not possible. And that, that felt weird and interesting and good. And so I just kept pushing this forward. A guy that was working on Extreme Makeover Home Edition with me, who was a famous guy from the old TV show on MTV called Road Rules. It was like MTV's first ever, and his name was Tim Beggy. And Tim is the one who introduced me to a director named James Mall, who, like, by the way, had won the Academy Award for Best Director the year before. Totally out of my league, like, beyond, I thought maybe I could find a student director. And I think this is a fun point too. Like I had a 30-minute meeting with James. I show up 20 minutes late to this meeting because I can't find it. It's like on the Sony back lots, and I'm driving around and I'm sweating and angry and all the things. And I slide into his office, and he literally only has 10 minutes, and I blurt out, the whole idea about the Sahara and native Tuaregs and sand and my Everest and like never been done before. This very dramatic 10 minutes, worst pitch ever, 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 like terrible. And he stands up at the end and he shakes my hand. He's like, I'll do it. And I think the lesson there is passion always trumps preparedness. Like the person you're talking to, especially with this kind of stuff, I think anything. I don't care if it's your business also. If that person picks up your passion, it is so much more important than the fact. I mean, eventually you have to show that you have your shit together, but like it's more important in those early moments that your passion comes across in such a way. James Mall knew I was going to do this with or without him. I wasn't asking his permission. I wasn't asking even for his help at that point. I was just telling him what the idea was. So a week later, he calls and tells me he just hung up with Matt Damon, and Matt wants to executive produce the project, and and he wants to be the narrator of the film. And James is like, would that be okay with you? You've known me for a while, Monty, and I basically just I took a beat. I took 5 seconds, 5 full seconds, which is a long time, especially for me to be quiet. Like that was like 3 seconds right there, and it seemed like forever. So I took 5 seconds. I said, James, I was really hoping for somebody better, but like if Matt Damon, if he wants to be involved, then that's
You'll
fine.
settle. Yeah.
I'll settle. So anyway, and then ultimately Hans Zimmer came on board to do the music for the film, but I have 3 Academy Award winners attached to a project about me running across deep sand, like super riveting stuff. And it's because I always say addicts are the best salespeople. Like we're great liars, and we spent years telling ourselves and other people that like I promise that's the last time, and we could get people to believe us. And I always say that that's how this came about. And anyway, a year and a half later, I'm on the start. I'm in Senegal with a couple of teammates who are going to run with me. There's 3 of us, and we're all looking at the maps and making plans, and everybody's very excited. We're starting the next day, and all I can think in that moment is, I have suckered all of these people to the Sahara Desert, and we're definitely going to die. Like there's no doubt. And we start this run, and I think in predictable fashion, we completely fall apart in the first 7 days. Completely, utterly. It's 125 degrees ground temperature. It's because you can make a plan, and everybody relates to this to a degree. Like you can make your plan, your list. Like here's all the things that you need. Here's all the things that could go wrong, and here's the contingency plan. What I didn't plan on was that like 10 of these things that could go wrong would go wrong at the exact same time. We ran out of food and water, and it's hot, and one of my vehicles blew up, and my 2 teammates are on IV drips every day. And like, this is going to be the shortest big expedition ever, really embarrassing. And Hollywood kind of tried to pull the plug on it. And I basically stuffed the sat phone deep into my duffel bag and didn't look at it for a week, and just refused to let anybody, stop us. And I now I'm going to get on to talking about the actual run, but like I think the most important point of this story that I like to emphasize is I had been sober a long time. The one day at a time mantra, I was pretty darn good at compartmentalizing and focusing on things. But I think we all, from time to time, get so attached to an outcome, especially if there's pressure, and pressure in the form of other people's money, for one, but like pressure from all these external things. I was so committed to getting all the way across the Sahara Desert that that's all I could think about. Well, I wasn't even 200 miles in at this point, right? And I was falling apart. And so I, like on day 8, I woke up and all I thought about was running a marathon in the morning. That was it. So I focused my team and myself on running a marathon. We took a little break at lunch, and all we thought about after lunch was running a second marathon before the end of the day. And in that way, slowly but surely, recognizing this mantra that I still use today, like the only miles you can run are the ones right in front of you. That's all that's even available to you. And so if you can just do those, you get a chance to do the next ones. And that applies to business and family and relationships and everything. And so by the time it was over, we'd run almost 5,000 miles. And, we ran 2 marathons every day for 111 consecutive days without a single day off. And again, I'm not an idiot. I planned the days off, but the original time was I had a 90-day run and we had 10 days planned. That's how far off I was. Like, but so we couldn't take days off, and it took 111 days, which took more budget and everything else. It was an expensive expedition, but we made it. We made it all the way across the Sahara. And I'll finish with this one tiny little note. I don't know why I'm predicting who's listening to this out there, but like I made every morning at 4:30 in the morning, I wrote down a little written journal, not journaling thoughts or anything, but my plan for the day. Here's where we're going. Here's how many miles we're doing. Here's the villages we're passing through. We're visiting clean water projects. Here's all the things. Out of 111 days, like 5 days, it went exactly as I wrote it. And like over 100 days, it went anywhere from just a little wrong to wildly wrong. I mean, to like all the worst things you can think of. But we made it. And it's not ever, you can recover from anything if you don't panic, if you don't take yourself out of the game, and you just sometimes let things pass by. So the Sahara was formative, to say the least. Oh, and there's the water piece. We started something called H2O Africa, and I raised about $6 million, and today it's known as water.org, and it's one of the world's largest clean water nonprofits with, I think we've dispensed over $4 billion in clean water. And it all came from this idea that running across the Sahara could be meaningful. And I didn't have a plan. I never have a plan. And, again, I have a general plan. I have an idea, but, I think you just have to like adapt. And that is it's the greatest skill a person can have, is to be adaptable and to read the room and see what's going on and find a new path if you need to.
What was the weather like? So in a day in the life of being in the Sahara, like what was the natural experience like? Like what did it smell like? What do you remember about the natural experience that was permeating for you and that you enjoyed most?
God, what a great question. I don't know that anybody's ever even asked me that. So I love deserts, partly because inherently, I don't know why, but I like heat. I just like heat. I do well in heat. Physically, I don't know. I probably somewhere way back generations, I must have been, lived in a desert. But, the mornings, the fascinating thing is it was very common to have a 70 or even 80-degree swing in a day. Like we'd wake up and it would be cold. I remember I stopped sleeping in my tent. I hated being in the tent. I liked to be out in the desert. So I'd sleep on this little thin foam mat, and I'd watch the space station every night going overhead. Because there's no electric lights within like 500 miles. So you could see everything. The feel of that was so cool, but I'd wake up in the morning and the weather would be nice and cool, and I'd be in my sleeping bag. Every single morning I would lift up my mat and there would be 1,000 scarab beetles under my mat. Like it freaked me out. I screamed like a little girl. Nothing against little girls. So I don't want to get any bad hate mail, but I screamed this high-pitched scream the very first morning I lifted up my mat, and there's all these scarab beetles under there, and it freaked me out. They just wanted a little, warmth. I mean, I was the warmest thing there was there, and so they would get under. But the mornings were always my favorite, magic and routines. Okay, you asked me one question. I'm gonna make it a little more nuanced. I didn't have one of these. All right, this is 2006 when this is going on. There were cell phones, but I didn't have one, and it wasn't going to work out there anyway. So I had the gift of being single-minded and focused on one thing every single day, moving myself and this team forward. So I didn't have to deal with anything else, and that's such a freeing thing to only have one task that you have to work on. So I would make my coffee. I'm a coffee snob, so my first smell in the morning is the porter, the guides that we had who were native Tuaregs, amazing people. Islamic, like they were devout. They prayed 5 times a day. It was a beautiful thing to just watch every day. But like they would bring the hot water, and I had a Bodum, a French press, and so I'd make my coffee, and I would serve coffee to everybody in the tent, for probably 45 minutes, and we would start the morning that way. And you step out, and the colors, and people think the desert is just one thing. It's like light brown, and like the colors are magical, and a whole rainbow array, and there's usually this like mist over the sand as maybe the little bit of moisture is sort of burning off. And I would keep, to your point, I kept an audio journal during the Sahara. It's the best thing I ever did. So for about 20 minutes every morning, when we would finally start running, I would do exactly what you just said. I would start my audio recorder, and I would talk about the smells, the visuals, the feelings that I have, not the nuts and bolts of necessarily what was going on, because we think we're going to remember these things later. Like when you have that moment and you're looking around and it's this perfect scenario, but you don't. You just don't remember it. Your memory is different than what it was. So it was like, I don't even know, 600 pages of transcribed notes much later. Probably cost me $5,000 to get this done. But best money I ever spent, because I was able to go back and and to you add context to the book and be able to add colors and sounds and feelings in a way that there's no way upon reflection that I'd be able to do. And we started slowly every day. I mean, I will make one point. We ran 5,000 miles and we averaged about a 9-minute per mile pace for the entire thing. To be clear, when I say 9 minutes, that's the running part. That doesn't count taking big breaks and like doing things. I'm just saying when we were actually moving, that's about the pace we were moving. So it wasn't like record setting or anything like that, but that's a pretty steady pace over the course of running about 50 miles every single day. And
in sand.
yeah, in sand. The sand was the hardest part. But weirdly, the sand gives you, it gave me the opportunity to gain a different understanding of acceptance. Again, you guys, when you're doing, the long race, I can't remember, 80 miles?
Yeah.
Do I have that about right? Yeah, there we go. But who's counting, right? That's what I always say. So 82 miles, like there's no, like the wind is going to be what the wind is. So you can either drive yourself, if it's in your face, what are you going to do? You're going to bitch to yourself about how bad the wind is the whole time? Or are you going to just put your paddle in the water and keep digging? Right. And so the sand became this thing where I actually I talked about to myself how much I loved the sand. And I do, like today, like I go to the beach and I'm not running down next to the water. I like to run still today in the deep sand. It's slower, but like it's more, it works all the little muscles and tendons, and actually it's better for you. And I found the happiness inside the hardship because I chose to.
Thank you. Thank you for diving
Great
into
question.
that's my favorite part of, in those natural environments. And the crossing, the only way I could relate to that is I've often told people the open ocean is basically a blue aqua desert. They very rarely see things when you're out there. If you do, it's very exciting because it's tantalizing that you actually got to see a flying fish or whatever it may be. So I was curious. I love that story of the beetles. What a great surprise to wake up to that. That's fantastic.
Yeah, it was great. And I know you guys have a great understanding of this. And there's also like nowhere to go, and I don't know, I realize you guys are asking me questions, but like, if the three of you reflect on even just sticking to that one event, the crossing, like what's the hardest moment you've had and how did you get through it? Like, I mean, I know we got limited time here, but like I'd love to hear that, from you guys, because there's probably a moment or at least one of the crossings that pops to mind immediately that like, oh yeah, that one.
I mean, I'll just share that I think there's so many similarities. I mean, I know we're talking like thousands of miles over desert sand across, as opposed to 80 miles of open ocean. So there's like some differences, but everything you described is what you go through in something like the crossing, where you have a plan. Well, after an hour, that plan is out the window. You know, diet, something's, you know, your crew gets sick, a boat engine breaks down, you know, you're chafing, like whatever it is, like everything goes sideways out there. And I know for me, it's always just been about breaking it up into those small chunks. So one stroke, next stroke, next stroke. Okay, I'm going to take a break in 20 minutes. I could get to 20 minutes, you know, and so it really is about breaking down what can be anywhere from, let's say, 12 or 13 to 16, 17 hours into those 20, 30-minute increments. Like, what do I need to actually address right now? And what do I need to address right now so that it won't become this big snowball problem in an hour or 2 hours from now, right? Do I have a blister that I really should, you know, address now? Otherwise, it's going to burst open here in 45 minutes. So really, I love how you describe, like, it just, anything adventure racing and any sort of ultra endurance, it just brings you right into the present moment. And if you're not present, you're not going to finish. You know, you're not going to, not that finishing is the goal, but right, like, you're not going to have a good time if you can't be present and address like what's happening in that moment.
Yeah, and one of the hard things I always find, you know, coming from a background as a runner as well, and competitively when I was younger, though never at the level you were at, Charlie, but is at least when you're on land, and I don't, you know, this could be very different. I've never run across the Sahara, so I don't have that experience, but at least on land you have visual markers that they kind of like when you were describing the event in Australia, right? It's like I've got that visual marker ahead of me. I just got to get there. And that was, you know, climbing Aconcagua a couple of years ago. I mean, that was a big part of it, right? It's like, okay, that rock, like I'm going to get to that rock. And then I'm going to pick out another thing. I'm going to get there. And then you should have that with the ocean. You don't really have that, benefit, right? So it becomes, to Josh's point, a lot more about time. It's like, okay, the next 20 minutes, the next 40 minutes, the next hour. And that's tough. Is having a visual marker to kind of, I am moving towards this point, this goal, I find is really helpful in those endurance activities, that you can kind of fixate your mind on and have these like mini wins, you know, along the way.
Yeah.
Travis, anything to add?
Yeah, I think the two things that come to mind. So this will be my 10th year doing the crossing. I've done it on relay teams. I've attempted it solo 5 times and completed it twice. I was always with other people, which were an influencing factor. But 2 things come to mind. One is, I think the hardest thing about those experiences, what weren't the times that I actually completed it, was the times that I didn't. It was the times I failed and I had to get in the boat. I had to quit because I had a lower back injury and I physically I could not go on, and it was getting in the boat and then having to sit with that for a long period of time on the boat and just process, like the integration of my ego just getting smashed into, you know, smithereens, right? So I think those are that's what's been the hardest at times, is when I didn't complete it. And then the other aspect of it that I see more clearly now than I used to, but to like what you said earlier, like that most of these endurance activities are more mental, but I also see that it's like it happens on layers, and it's like the challenging the sovereignty and the inner constitution are being, right? Like on an emotional level, a mental level, a physical level, but also like on this level of consciousness and awareness of like that, this sovereignty of our interior state that's really being challenged, like to hold that within ourselves. You know, you could call it integrity, you could call it different things, but there's so many layers of it. And I think that if you're not used to that, being in those environments, then the environment can become such a externalized source of harsh input or reality that like it can, it can really disable you. But that interior state is quite an extraordinary place to like have to exist within yourself when it gets so painful. So I think that's like, I think the hardest thing for me is staying within myself and not letting all the things outside of me get to me, and get me too far, too far off track.
That was deep, brother. That was great. Wow. I had a big smile on my face through that because I also wonder, this is a weird question. Have all of you DNF'd that event at least once or not?
I have not DNF'd the crossing. I have DNF'd a 50K in the sand dunes of Florida, though.
Okay. Okay. So I think I'm asking an obvious question, but like an hour, a day, a week after quitting, are you second guessing yourself and saying, well, did I really need to quit? Like, what could I have done? Like, I could have gone on, right? I mean, I've like, what's, the revisionist history that we're able to do in our, our processing, I think is really fascinating. Even if you have an injury, I mean, injuries are a little easier to quantify because you can say, okay, but like, could you have just taken like 800 more milligrams of ibuprofen and like powered through? Like, were you going to be paralyzed, or was it just an unwillingness to, suffer for longer, for more?
I think the convenient part of the crossing is the weather, right? So Travis and I had this experience this past year when lightning bolts start rolling in, and you're like, oh, I think we should get in the boat.
Yeah, and, sometimes it's out of your hands.
But at that point, I was like very happy to get in the boat.
Yeah.
I remember the first time I did the crossing in 2018, and I paddleboarded a bit. I surfed growing up, but it never occurred to me to paddle that long. But I was like, I'm going to go beach to beach. I'm going to do this thing, as we call it, iron, and never get in the boat. I didn't know if that was possible for me personally, but it was my goal, and I was able to accomplish that. But I remember at one point in the middle of it, I was like, God, I really would love to get attacked by a shark.
Right, it would just make it easy.
Or just make it easier.
Well,
just be like,
it'd be a cool story for your kids. I mean, right? Even if you're gone, at least it's not dad died.
Well, I don't know if I wanted to be killed by the shark, but the attack would have at least been an excuse to get in the boat and be done with the experience. And it was it would be interesting. I'd be like, no, I'd be fine with that trade-off right now. But yeah,
well, you remind me of this, and I think it's almost a harder thing that you guys have to deal with in that event because comfort is actually so close to you.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean? It's right there. And so it's tempting. Like the races that I do that are loop races, they're the worst because you can quit it's convenient to quit or to, whatever. And like so after the Sahara, a year later, I attempted to run across the United States and set a record for the fastest crossing. And I was unsuccessful. I fell apart after about 20 days. But one of the things that made that run the hardest was that like Super 8 Motels was one of my partners. Every single night I had more motel than hotel, but it didn't matter. Like I had a comfortable bed and a shower. I only had 2 showers in the Sahara Desert, for almost 4 months.
Oh my God.
It's amazing.
But weirdly, that was freeing, because when you were the same as everybody, nobody else was getting showers either. So when that is just that's the baseline and everybody's operating from, so much easier. What I found with running America was I needed to run about 75 miles a day. Invariably, I would get to 50 miles every day, and I would start thinking about the bed and the shower and the food, and it really messed me up. Like mentally, it made it so much harder. Whereas the Sahara, and like if you guys had no, here's the thing, if you had no boat, if there was no safety boat, guess what? You would keep paddling.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, you just would. You actually
I
would.
mean, I asked Travis if I could go beach to beach without the safety of a boat, and he quickly shut that down.
Yeah.
I was just like,
No,
oh, come
so
on, I'll sign whatever legal document you want me to sign. Let me just go at it alone. And
yeah. Well, I will point out to
understandably,
you that's available to you anytime, Josh. I hate to draw a big circle around it, but I'm pretty sure the water.
I'll do it like the day before the actual crossing.
As a board member for Piper's Angels Foundation, we do not condone. We do not need to have a lost paddler.
Okay, one more question though for you guys. Then, all right, how long does it? I mean, within reason, what's an average or normal period of time it takes to do the crossing?
I've done 5 solos, and it's taken me anywhere from 12 to 16 hours.
Okay.
It is very condition dependent: wind, current, swell, that kind of thing.
Okay. So forgetting about the distance, in the Sahara, I ran. It was about a 12-hour day for me every day of running. Like there was a break in there, like whatever. But let's just call it 12 hours. So I did 12 hours for like 111 days in a row. Could you wrap your mind around getting up the next day and doing it again like if you were doing, and I know a couple people have done like ocean crossings on a stand-up paddleboard. Is that something that you look at and think, I absolutely could not do that? Or is it that like thing way out there that you say to yourself, I wonder if I could?
I mean, I know I personally have thought about, could I paddle from Miami to Bimini, meet up with everybody in Bimini, and then paddle back on the official day of the crossing. Now, logistically, it'd be really, really difficult to hit Bimini in the middle of the ocean. But practically speaking, after doing all of my solos, like, I don't know if I could get up the next day and do it all over again. Yeah. But I understand that that's the mental limit right there.
It's amazing though how the body can recover, right?
Oh, yeah.
I remember that first year when I finished, I mean, I was wrecked. And then the next morning I woke up, and other than feeling pretty sunburned, I was like pretty quickly got back to where I could move again, right? So it's just that, the body is a lot more, body and the mind, I mean, are both, but a lot more powerful than people give them credit for, right?
The mental, did you want to add something, Travis?
The only thing I was going to add is I've never spent that much time on the open ocean, like on a paddleboard for more than a day, let's say. But anytime I've been on a sailboat, I know that with the ocean, it seems like it often gets easier after a few days. So like once you're out there and your body gets used to it, I mean, what I always tell people is paddling is inherently slow, safe, and easy. Like your average person, can get on, if they was on a stable wide paddleboard, could get on one in a flat condition with the current and wind and go for a pretty long ways. So it can be very leisurely is what I'm saying. So like if it was a leisure thing and not like, I think to Josh, I saw Josh come in. Josh raced I always tell people there's like in paddling, there's slow, slower, and slowest. And if you think you're going to like thrive through the crossing, like if you think you're going to go out there and race and like paddle hard, like to me, that's insane. Like to me, just getting across slow and steady is enough. Like there's enough survival in that. But to push yourself, I've seen it push people to the brink of dangerous, a dangerous physical situation.
But I think so. Maybe this is a good transition, slow and steady, to your next big epic adventure. Which I know does have some time constraints because of what you're trying to accomplish, but isn't necessarily about how do I get from point A to, in this case, point Z in the fastest way possible, right? But to really enjoy the experience. And one of the one of the points of this podcast is to explore these kind of the ancient wisdom traditions, right, in the context of the modern world. And you are literally going to be moving with your own power through multiple wisdom traditions on your next adventure, which just from a overall experience standpoint is amazing. But why don't you fill people in on Dead Sea to Everest? Partially the inspiration behind it, but really what you're most looking forward to,
Yeah.
you're projecting out to actually being in immersed in that experience.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, so this expedition coming up, it's going to start January 1st of 2027. So it is, as time has a habit of doing, it's sneaking up on me. But I will, in fact, I'm going to share some news that's unknown out there in the world at this point, because I've been saying forever that I'm going to start at the shore of the Dead Sea in Jordan. It now looks like I may very well start at the shore of the Dead Sea in Israel and actually stand up paddleboard my way across the Dead Sea to Jordan. And be current events, politics, which I don't concern myself with, generally speaking. All of those things seem to indicate I wouldn't get to start on the Israeli side. And now it looks like, excuse me, through some connections and some, it's like I was saying earlier, very often we assume what's on the ground in other places and we believe what the media says and whatever. And a lot of times it's not what you think. And so I'm going to get to start there. I'm going to go across the Dead Sea and I'm going to do a free dive to the like lowest place that I can reach in the Dead Sea, which, I mean, look, man, could be 50 feet, could be 20. My feet still might be sticking out of the water like a handstand at the YMCA.
A lot of salt
I
in
don't
that
know.
sea.
Because I'm not really I am a diver, but this will be and I'll prepare for it. But even getting under the surface of the water is going to take probably 75 or 80 pounds of extra weight. Like it's the most buoyant water on the planet. I'm going to come back up. Otherwise, if I don't come back up, it's like literally the world's shortest expedition. So it'll be like a 60-second film. I just go under it. I just never come back up. And when I get to the shore of Jordan, I'll start to run and I'll run and bike all the way across Jordan and Saudi Arabia and Oman, passing through UNESCO World Heritage sites and cultural locations. And, I like to tell people, think more Anthony Bourdain does adventure travel. And this is the growth curve, I guess, for me. I passed through hundreds of villages crossing the Sahara, and I've done a lot of big expeditions, and they've all been meaningful to me, but I still was focused more on the physical movement than I was the cultural exploration. It's a combination, but like this is way more the inherent part, the physical part of this is inherently built in. I'm going to cover 5,000 miles from the Dead Sea to the top of Mount Everest, and it's going to be human powered. Doesn't take a genius to figure out that's going to be hard, and it's going to be long, and there's a ticking clock. So anyway, I get to the tip of Oman, I'm sailing 1,000 miles across the Indian Ocean to Mumbai. It looks like it's either Mumbai or Goa, which is a little further south. Then I'm and by the way, you said this, and I do want to say, like, I have things set up with spiritualists, holy men, shamans, whatever you want to call these various people, because I am curious. I'm not a religious person. I'm not I am that classic, like spiritual, not religious, but, I like to hear other people's perspectives on the exact things that you just talked about. And so I would be a fool not to listen to the wisdom of other people in other cultures. And so when I get to India, I will make my way on mountain bike all the way across India to northern India, especially. In Dharamsala, I have a get together, a private audience with the Dalai Lama, who at this point in his life, as I understand it, is pretty greatly diminished, I think both physically and mentally. But that's not the point, just being in his presence for some peace and quiet, being around some of the people who do surround him and the kind of wisdom they have. Hopefully I'll visit with this woman who is like the Dalai Lama's oracle. And she's supposed to, it's this amazing story where like she was a regular person in a village and woke up one day and she all of a sudden spoke like four different ancient languages that hadn't been heard for, centuries. And it's this fascinating story. And I'm a natural skeptic and I also want to believe. So I want like things like that. I want to go see that person for myself. And that's what I actually am looking forward to.
Can you plug her for the Wisdom Matrix podcast?
Yeah. No, we're going to be there. We're going to be, we're going to go on the road with Charlie.
Yeah. Well, maybe that's the time. That's the time to come with me, is join me in that portion of India, and we'll do a couple of podcasts. I'll be your special facilitator for an on the road podcast tour for a few days. But seriously, I mean, I'm not. Marty knows I'm definitely not joking. You guys probably do too.
Yes, Charlie is very willing to have people along for the ride.
Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, look,
don't tempt me with a good time.
No, I mean it's not even a temptation. It's more than a temptation. It's an invitation, and it's people have to know what they're getting into. But like you already know. I mean, even if you've never been there and you've never done something like this isn't going to be about the hard physical effort every day. This is about the desire to be curious and to learn from other people. 2-second step back to the Sahara. I had a crew of 6 men who were devout Muslim, and I watched them pray 5 times a day for 111 straight days. And it was beautiful. Like, they invited me to pray a few times. They just went about their life. There wasn't they didn't want to be clapped on the back for it, or there wasn't anything there. So to actually, you hear about things and then you actually witness. And so often it's so much more beautiful in person and not what people represent. But I'll make my way to Everest Base Camp. I am still, Marty kind of knows this, but because Marty has been, to give him props, he's been part of the ideation team around putting this whole expedition together. And he's always been a good ear for me to talk to. And I'm grateful for you for that.
Vishnu Karma. That's his Indian Sanskrit name. If you want to put that one in the bag to carry it with you across, that's cosmic engineer.
He has no choice. It's who he is. That's right. It is exactly. So, but
it's fun to support.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I'm sure I know I'm a pain in the ass too sometimes, but you knew the job was dangerous when you took it. So I have no apologies for you for that. So, but I'll get to Western Nepal, and there's a great friend of mine there who has I'm doing clean water again as another big part of this expedition, this time with charity water as my, I'm raising funds for them and being a proponent for what they do. It's a whole different model where 100% of all public donations go to clean water projects, and they raise separately for all of the administrative costs. So I just love their model, and they do a ton of work in India and Nepal. So I'm going to get to pass through places where there are already existing projects and new ones that we hopefully can bring there. And then I'll make my way to Everest Base Camp. But here's the catch. I don't know at this point whether I'm going to climb from the south side or the north side, the Tibetan side. My desire is to climb from Tibet, China, if you will, in case the Chinese are listening. There's a lot of reasons for it. Crowds. I mean, there were 1,000 summits this year on Mount Everest from the south side. And I mean, half of those were Sherpas, but it was it was insanity from what I hear. And I would like to do it differently. And there's only about 20% of the traffic on the north side. It's a much less glamorous thing. There's no amenities. There's a lot of amenities actually on the south side, which is weird. But the north side would allow me. The Chinese have built a road all the way to base camp, so I actually could become, maybe the first person to, I'm not sure about this, but to actually ride my bike to Everest Base Camp and then climb to the top. So that's interesting to me, is to do something a little bit different and to go on the north side. But it's the lowest place on the planet to the highest. The metaphor writes itself. Mm-hmm. We're all on this journey from down here to up here, and lots of dips and valleys in between. It's life's journey. I mean, from a spiritual standpoint, like this is the, it's a quest, and the underlying all these years, 33 years of sobriety, and all of the self-imposed and out of the blue suffering that I've gone through has paid huge dividends for me on this. And maybe the most important piece of this that I will share is my kids, my two sons who are 31 and 34, are coming along on this journey with me as
Wow.
my support team for as much of it as possible. And my wife is going to come join. And honestly, that is actually going to be the story. My kids, I don't know, probably 10 years ago, they're already adults at that point, but we're having this great conversation, and we're doing this. We did this boating thing, and we're sitting there talking one day, and like my younger son said, we're so proud of all the things that you've accomplished and that you've gone through, but man, it sure would have been nice if you'd been around more.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like,
Yeah.
I mean, and that wasn't the purpose of what they were doing, and it was spontaneous, but the recognition for me to be able to acknowledge the fact that that's how they feel. And it's not that they were angry that about it. It was just a desire and an understanding that it would have been nice if I'd been around more. And I was around plenty. See, I'm getting ready to dive into justification here, but like, let's just, they're going to come. Part of the reason for them to come on portions of this is to include them in this, and to have this experience together. Because you guys do this event you're talking about, and you can explain it to me all you want. And I have a pretty good ability to conceptualize what something is like. But until I go do it, or if I go do it with you, that's the only way I'm ever going to understand it. And I don't want to do another big thing, especially at 64 years old, come back home and tell my kids about it. I want them to have the experience, and they want to. And my wife is, in whatever capacity she can, she's going to come join. And I'm going to get a tandem bike in India, and she's going to cycle with me some, regardless of,
Nice.
where she is, physically. And like, we're just doing this. Like, there's no can we or how are we? It's just we are. And once you get to that mentality, anything is possible.
One, the journey is going to be visually stunning. So I can't wait for the cinematic output of that, which is
It's going to rock, dude. I mean,
rock.
Look, the Sahara, we didn't have drones in the Sahara.
Yeah.
So we had some beautiful shots, but now today, especially with drone photography and videography, it's insane.
Yeah.
And this is every ecosystem on the planet. Lowest place to highest point. It's oceans and deserts and high mountains, and it's just going to be stunning.
And part of the strategy too, and we kind of joked about it earlier, but it's legit. Is the point is to have people join you for various portions of it, right? So it's, as from an experience standpoint, it's also part of the fundraising efforts for the expedition, right? It's not just about having people support financially, but supporting financially, but then being part of the actual expedition. You're probably not going to have anyone join you for the whole thing as a participant, right? But for these sections, especially around really interesting cultural opportunities, is a really compelling opportunity for folks who've got a little time on their hands and adventure in their blood.
No, and I will, I don't know how quickly you guys post, but I will get you a couple of contact things so that people can follow along, even starting now. I am launching a Substack that it's a different model, which I'm not going to bother to explain. Our mutual friend Greg has been helping me with this, but it's going to be cool. So there's a free version, there's a paid version, but like, I'm taking a Starlink, on this trip, and I will be doing calls live, updates from the desert, from the ocean, from the mountains. And, and I'm not a big social media guy. I think that. I have a decent following on social media. But I don't need likes from a million people who I don't know. I would much rather engage with a few hundred people that really, really want to embrace this experience, and maybe if not come along physically, come along, in spirit by being fully tuned into this thing. And as you know, Marty, man, the one thing you will never see from me, I mean, if I'm having a great day, I'm going to say I'm having a great day. But if I'm having a shitty day or a hard day, or there's things on my mind or emotions or doubts, which I have tons of, and fear, I'm going to share those things, because that vulnerability and authenticity, I hope, is what makes it interesting. Because who wants to watch somebody do something really hard and make it look easy? Because I promise you it's not easy. If we turned a camera on you guys doing the crossing, the danger would be, if it only got turned on a couple of times, you would probably pump yourself up for 60 seconds and say all the right things. And the second the camera's off, it's like, oh.
Yeah, you throw up a shot in your
Yeah.
camera. Well,
Yeah, and I don't
the
want to do
beauty,
that.
yeah, and the beauty of, having social media and having, the opportunity now that wasn't available during the Sahara is to communicate to that broader audience. And I think in this world where it is very divisive, we read the news or watch the news and have assumptions about other places, to have a firsthand account of really what the world outside of your comfort zone is like, and the people and experiences. Hopefully that can be inspiring people who you've never met, but are able to join you for that journey, even if it is digitally. So I think that is going to hopefully inspire a lot of open-mindedness and adventure for folks who you'll never actually encounter directly, right?
Well, and I want to say one before I know we're probably wrapping in a sec, but I want to come back to something I said earlier, because I want to encourage people who might want to come out and join, or just people who are going to find their own experience in some way. I think we all, me included, we get too attached to outcomes, and we make a plan, and then we think our business path is going to be this certain path, and we're going to we're going to sell our business in 5 years from now. Like we have it all mapped out, and we forget the oldest adage of all time, which is the journey, not the destination. And like when I crossed the Sahara, I told people so often my why before the Sahara, like, why am I doing this? And I couldn't tell you what they are anymore, but like I had a bunch of reasons. By the time I got to the other side, I got there, all my reasons had changed. My why revealed itself along the way. And so with this one, I know some things that I want to do and that I hope to feel and experience, but I am going open. I want to have a curious heart and an open mind, and just go have the experience, and the why will lay it out for me during the experience. Like that's about the deepest thing I'm capable of saying, is the why reveals itself if we let it. And if we try to force the why that we thought we had from the beginning, it never feels right. Or it might line up once in a while, but it limits us to a narrow path of what we hope to get out of something, anything, any experience, frankly. The hardest commitment to make is to just go do the thing, to say that you're going to do it, make the plan, and go do it. And then adapt and accept and battle when you need to battle, and, whatever, but just accept that the why will be revealed as you're having the experience.
So Mati, does this mean that Charlie is like an unofficial, official my wellness athlete ambassador, or like, are we like, just we're gonna piggyback on the production side and slide in somehow and
yes.
join the adventure?
I
will
think all three of us.
Yeah, we will join for the adventure in
You are welcome.
capacities.
Well, hey, maybe that is the idea. Maybe, I mean, I don't want to I love what you just said. Maybe there is I don't know how often, weekly, I'm going to be bold here, and it's not a 2-hour thing, but it's a 30-minute thing where there's a check-in. I mean, maybe there's a version of this that would be interesting for your audience that you guys participate in. And then of course you come do at least one or two of them with me live in person.
Yeah.
I mean, I think people would really, I think people would enjoy that, and not just to hear, if I'm just doing my own thing, that's fine sometimes, but conversation is where things are revealed.
The good thing about having a podcast is you get to pick and choose the conversations you have. So we're picking the conversations we want to have, not based on what we think people want to hear. So yeah, I'm all for that.
Yeah. This is a scratch our own itch kind of situation
Yeah.
that's setting
Yeah.
itself up. And I think I mean, you're going through obviously one of my favorite regions in Oman, and Saudi. That part of the world is really beautiful. But the India portion is going to be fascinating because you're going to be going through. I mean, I would assume some fairly densely populated places, a lot of, I mean, there's just going to be, I mean,
Is
an
there any place
abundance
in
of
India
opportunities to
that's
stop
not?
and chat and so I've just, my only hope for you is that like you keep moving through India because there's going to be a lot of distraction on that part of the journey.
Yeah, well, the beauty of cycling also, if you're just running, as I did in the Sahara, if you get 100 miles behind and you're just running, I can't magically wake up one day and run an extra 100 miles. But, part of the advantage of having cycling as part of this is, I'm pretty good about saying, okay, today I just need to put my head down and ride, 200 miles, and let's cover this ground, and we may not stop and do as much talking today. So I think we can stay on, because schedule is something you talked about earlier. Like, I have to be to Everest Base Camp by roughly the first week of April. Well, not roughly, exactly the first week of April, whichever side, whatever I'm doing. So, and as we talked a little bit beforehand, Ramadan starts in the Middle East in February 7. So I've got to get across the Arabian Desert before then and get on a boat headed over. But here's what I think about. I think about this conversation, the four of us sitting around a campfire with a couple cameras on, and it's nothing more than a couple hour conversation about the experience that we just had that day,
Mm.
whatever it was,
Yeah.
and that's where the good stuff is. So now you guys, now
Yeah.
you've said it out loud.
It's already written.
Yeah, it is.
Ch- Charlie, I'd love to dive into one more question
Yeah.
before we land this ship. And I really love on how this Dead Sea to Everest project, you're including your family, your sons and your wife. And clearly that has meaning to you. But circling all the way back to the where we started, you opened up by mentioning your father and your grandfather both being athletes and your grandfather being a well-known coach. And so I just can't help but see like your grandfather, your father, yourself, and now your boys and four generations of men. And I'm just like, what comes through for you? Like, clearly there's been an impact from your father and your grandfather, and you're having an impact on your boys. And I'm just, yeah,
Yeah.
curious on like what comes up for you
Man,
on that.
thank you for that. It's such an important chapter of my life, and I'll tell a quick story. In writing the book, I wrote, so my grandfather was an All-American in track and field at University of North Carolina in the early 20s, 22, 23, 24. And he became, in 1924, the head track coach and cross country coach at Carolina, because times were just different. So he went from being like the best athlete they ever had to being the coach the next year. And he remained coach for over 40 years. And he died. In fact, it's a poignant question for another reason. He was 63 years old when he was diagnosed with colon cancer, and he died within 3 months. And I'm 63 now. And, I think about the advances, but I was born in 62. So I don't have a single picture of me with my grandfather, even, not even as a baby. I think he was a track coach. Times were different. I don't think my granddad was, I certainly don't have any memories of him. But this crazy thing happened during the writing of my book. I mentioned my grandfather, and my editor said, "Okay, well, why don't you write this? Just write it." I wrote about an 18-page story about my grandfather, and it included this, um, things I knew about him and the legacy of growing up in a family where everybody said to me, you remind us of your grandfather. Like you're going to be a runner just like your grandfather. So from the earliest days of my life, I was told that I was going to be a runner. And, I don't know, I don't know if that works all the time, but like for me, it stuck. It just stuck and I loved it. So I write this story and I'm going to keep it very brief. But in 2008, before running America, I went to this spa out in Arizona, one of the top spas in the world, and I was speaking, but I got some free like services. I got like every day I could have a massage or a stone massage or whatever. And on the third day, I hadn't reserved anything, and I called the front desk like, "Oh my gosh, I want to do something different." Different. She said, "Well, we just had a cancellation for a spiritual cleansing. Would you like to do that?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah, why not?" It chains, it's on the grounds of the place. Like I run over there 5 minutes away and I get there and it's this amazing Native American. He's an MD though, like he's this super accomplished, fascinating man. I settle down, I sit on the bench and I start just relaxing and he's talking to me and he's just got a hand on my shoulder the whole time. He's just got a hand on my shoulder. And about 10 minutes into our talk, we haven't started anything. He finally just says to me, he says, "Look, you had a grandfather that was a very famous runner." And I was like, "Yeah." And he said, "He wants you to know that he runs with you every day." And like, it was, look, man, I'm a natural skeptic sometimes. And like, his last name is my mother's name. It's Ranson. It's not Engle. His name was Dale Ranson, Ranson. And like, there's no way that this guy could know this. There's no way this man could know about my grandfather. And yet he does. And it freaked me out. It changed. And then I spent an hour getting, saged and oiled and eagle feathers. And like, I had this really great, amazing experience. But anyway, when I wrote the story and I sent this 18-page story to my editor, she wrote back and she's like, "That is absolutely the most beautiful story and the best writing that you've done throughout this whole process." And I'm like, "Thank you. That's amazing. I'm so excited about it." And she said, "Yeah, but it doesn't belong in the book." And I'm like, "What?" Like, so it's one paragraph in the book. That's all you'll ever see about my grandfather. And her point was, this is a 300-page book. You have 300 pages to tell a story. You can use 18 of them if you want. The publisher might push back, but how does this move your story forward for the reader? Like if the reader doesn't know all this detail, how does it actually affect everything? So I got her point and everything else, but like today I still, I honor and I think about my grandfather every single time I take a step,
Wow.
out on the trail. And I appreciate you asking because it's Madi's known me through some of my, I'm in a spiritual growth period these days, that's been going on for a few years. And there's a lot of things that I'm doing and trying and searching and exploring and powerful things. And my grandfather is always kind of there in this equation. And I feel lucky to have that even from a man that I never knew really in person. So thank you.
Yeah.
That's an
Amazing.
incredible story. And do
Yeah.
you remember the name of the spiritualist that you met with?
I've got it written down. I'll
Yeah.
get it for you.
You gotta
Yeah.
share that with us because that's like
Yeah.
that's a mind-blowing story. Yeah. Love it.
Yeah. And this is long before. I mean, look, man, I've been a moderately woo-woo person. I grew up in this very hippie family and I'm with my mom, just my mom and stepdad. And, so I'm open, but but I am a skeptic. I always say I'm a pragmatic woo-woo person. I'm like, okay, fine, get on with it. Get on. There's a point at which I roll my eyes if it gets too just too much. And I mean, that's just how I'm built. It's not disrespectful. I'm just like, I want to get to the good stuff. And I know that's part of my own growth pattern is I need to be more patient. But this guy really, he changed everything. And my entire view of the way the world out there or in here, wherever all that lives, how that actually manifests. Because like this was not a magic trick. Like he couldn't, he knew something that he could not possibly have known.
It's so incredible. I don't know if you're familiar with the story, but you should definitely listen to it or read it if possible. But it's eerily similar to the first encounter that Ram Dass had with his guru, Neem Karoli Baba Maharaji. It's eerily similar. And it's like, and that literally was the moment that changed everything for him.
Mm-hmm.
Super cool.
Thank you for sharing that. I want to know that story because I, of course, am a Ram Dass, aficionado, and like but I don't know exactly that story. And it's like we all said. I said it earlier. Words said to us by a stranger can change everything. And I went into this thing just wanting something different than a hot stone massage, which is nothing wrong with a hot stone massage, but that's not what I wanted that day. And it shifted something inside me that I think was a really important shift for me.
Yeah. And that's life, right? Being open to receive these experiences at any given time. And I always say you wake up in the morning, you just have no idea how the day is going to progress, right? And what sometimes hard, sometimes great, but it's the uncertainty of life is kind of makes it worth living.
Well, and the thing that I know we're trying to wrap, but the thing that I can't in this world that I occupy, I run across too many people who claim to know for sure, absolutely, some answer to the universe or whatever. And I have a huge problem with that. I steer clear of that person, because I'm comfortable with the person with great wisdom who says maybe that he or she knows for themselves what their truth is or how they got there. But I am on this journey as you guys are. We're on our own discovery journey, and it's not for anybody else to ever tell me what my truth is. And, I want to come to that place on my own, which is why to this day, I still run. My way of connecting with nature is, I have to be out in it, not inside looking out at it. I want to be out there feeling it and moving through it. And that's where every, usable discovery I've ever had has come from.
Amazing. Beautiful. Well, that's a great place to wrap, and we will have more conversations, hopefully live on the expedition with you in some remarkable places, and we'll share with our listeners all your details and how to follow and support, and we will be there by your side throughout the whole journey. So we're super excited about that and appreciate the time today and all the stories. And for our listeners out there, if you enjoyed this conversation, and please like, share, do all the things to help grow our audience. So we'd appreciate it, and just blessed to have these conversations and to have you on today, Charlie.
It was so much fun, beyond fun. So thank you to all three of you. I really enjoyed it.